No one understood why an old Korean man suddenly went viral until they saw the video. Kwame, a 16-year-old boy from Accra, was walking home from school when something unusual caught his eye. A quiet, old cafe sat at the end of a sunlit street, dusty windows glowing in the late afternoon light. Most people passed without noticing it, but today, Kwame saw movement inside. Through the glass, he noticed an elderly Korean man sitting at a piano. The man's hair was white and neatly combed, his face lined with years of stories, and his hands trembled slightly as they hovered above the keys. Something about the way he moved seemed deliberate, calm, almost sacred. Kwame's curiosity grew. He stepped inside quietly, careful not to disturb the silence. The cafe smelled of old wood, dust, and faint traces of coffee. Sunlight filtered through cracked windows, illuminating tiny particles in the air. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost otherworldly. The man closed his eyes and pressed a single key. The note rang out, pure and haunting. It was so soft that at first, Kwame thought he imagined it. Then another note followed, and another. Slowly, a melody formed, simple, yet filled with emotion that Kwame could feel deep in his chest. Kwame's eyes widened. He had seen street musicians before, but this was different. This music felt alive. Every note seemed to carry a story, a lifetime of memories. He fumbled with his phone and started recording, making sure the camera stayed hidden behind a coffee cup. The man's fingers moved with surprising strength and precision for someone his age. Kwame could see small scars on his hands, evidence of years of practice, dedication, and sacrifice. It was clear that the man had been playing for decades, though no one around seemed to know. After a few minutes, the man paused. His eyes opened slowly, and he glanced toward Kwame. Kwame froze, unsure if he had been noticed. The man smiled faintly, almost as if he had been expecting him all along. There was a warmth in that smile, and yet, a quiet sadness too. Kwame whispered under his breath, This is incredible." The man nodded slightly and returned to the keys. He began playing a melody that was more complex now, weaving in soft pauses and sudden bursts of sound. The cafe seemed to fade away. Outside, children's laughter and the traffic sounds disappeared from Kwame's mind. There was only the music. After a while, Kwame noticed a small girl standing by the door, staring at the piano with wide eyes. The man gently beckoned her forward and, without a word, handed her a small sheet of music. She looked down, unsure at first, then smiled as if understanding something without being told. Kwame recorded the whole scene, heart-pounding. He could already imagine sharing it online. The world needed to see this, to feel what he was feeling. The melody was too beautiful to stay hidden in this small cafe. As the man played, Kwame began to notice subtle acts of kindness around him. The man reached down to help an elderly woman outside adjust her bag. He gave a warm nod to the cafe owner, who was quietly cleaning tables. Every movement, every interaction seemed calm and meaningful. It was not just the music, he carried kindness with him, and it radiated silently, touching everyone nearby. Kwame's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it at first, too absorbed in the moment. Then he remembered that he wanted to capture this. He moved closer, careful to remain unnoticed. The man's eyes flicked up briefly but returned to the keys. Kwame realized that the music was a kind of invitation. It was asking to be heard, not just by him, but by anyone willing to listen. Finally, the man stopped playing. Silence returned to the cafe, but it was different now. Silence felt heavy, full of meaning, as if the air itself remembered the notes that had just been played. Kwame lowered his phone, feeling a mix of awe and excitement. He knew this video would not just be watched, it would go viral, not because of the man's fame, but because the music carried something human, deep, and unforgettable. The man stood slowly, his back slightly hunched, and gave Kwame a nod. He didn't say anything, but Kwame understood. There was a story here, a life lived fully, patiently, and with care. He felt honored to have witnessed even a fragment of it. As Kwame left the cafe, he uploaded the video online. Within minutes, notifications began to pour in. Friends, strangers, and music lovers from all over commented, shared, and marveled at the melody. Some speculated it must be an unreleased composition by a legendary musician. Others simply wrote, "This made my heart stop. I've never felt anything like it." Kwame smiled, watching the views climb. But he knew the real reward was not the attention. It was that moment, that single note, that music which reminded him that kindness, patience, and dedication could change a day, or even the world. As he walked home, the sun setting behind him, he couldn't stop thinking about the elderly man at the piano. Who was he? Why had he been here, quietly playing in this forgotten corner of Accra? Kwame felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet suspense, as if this was only the beginning. And in the cafe, the man looked out the window, eyes soft, knowing that his music had finally found someone who would carry it to the world. Kwame walked home, the warm evening breeze brushing against his face. His phone vibrated constantly. Notifications poured in from people he had never met, strangers marveling at the melody, commenting on how pure and haunting it was. Some even suggested it must belong to a legendary musician. Kwame's heart raced. He had just recorded an old man at a small cafe, and now the world was watching. That night, he lay on his bed, unable to sleep. He replayed the video over and over. Every note felt like it carried a story, a life lived fully, quietly, without expectation. He remembered the subtle acts of kindness he had seen, the man helping the little girl with the sheet music, assisting the elderly woman outside, nodding warmly to the cafe owner. It was not just music, it was the way he moved in the world, silently shaping it. The next morning, Kwame returned to the cafe. He wasn't sure what he expected, but the old man was there, waiting. The piano looked as if nothing had changed overnight, but the energy in the room had shifted. "Good morning," Kwame said softly. The man nodded, then gestured toward the piano. Kwame felt a strange pull. "Would you play again?" he asked hesitantly. The man smiled faintly. "If you wish." As he played, the cafe filled with sound once more. This time, Kwame noticed the subtle details, the way the man's eyes closed and opened at just the right moment, the tiny smile as certain notes resonated perfectly, the gentle pause after every phrase. The music was alive. Kwame's phone was ready. As he recorded, he realized that this video would do more than entertain, it would inspire. He uploaded it to multiple platforms. Within hours, the views skyrocketed. Hashtags began to trend, hashtag forgotten composer, hashtag piano magic, hashtag Accra piano man. People from all over the world were trying to identify him. Some left comments in Korean, some in English, others in French and Spanish. The boy watched, amazed, as strangers connected over a simple melody played in a forgotten cafe. News outlets contacted him. Small local newspapers reached out, asking for interviews. Kwame politely replied, saying he didn't know much about the man, only that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. Meanwhile, the cafe owner, an older woman named Abina, approached Kwame quietly. "You've shared something very special," she said. "That man, he has lived a long life quietly. Few notice him. But he is remarkable." Kwame nodded. "I know. I just hope people understand him." Days passed, and the story grew. A music teacher in Seoul, Korea, saw the video online. Something about the notes felt familiar. She paused, her heart racing. She knew the style, the technique, it was unmistakable. She quickly typed an email to the International Music Association. This man, he might be Lee Min-jun, the legendary composer who disappeared decades ago. Back in Accra, the old man continued to play every day. Kwame often sat quietly in the corner, observing. One afternoon, a little girl accidentally dropped her backpack near the piano. The man stopped mid-note, bent down, and carefully lifted it, handing it back with a gentle nod. The girl smiled, thanking him shyly. Kwame felt warmth in his chest. It wasn't just music that made this man extraordinary, it was how he treated the world around him. Then, one day, a stranger walked into the cafe. She spoke slowly in broken English, holding a small camera. "I saw your video," she said to the man. "People everywhere, they want to meet you. They say your music is," she paused, searching for the right word. "Magical." The man's eyes glimmered. He gestured toward Kwame. "He shared it," he said softly. Kwame's heart leapt. It wasn't much, he said. The man shook his head. It was everything. You gave my music a voice again. Kwame realized then that this was bigger than fame or recognition. The music had the power to connect people across continents, to remind them of something pure and human. Every note carried kindness, patience, and the unspoken stories of a lifetime. By now, the video had millions of views. People were traveling from nearby cities just to hear him play. Some brought instruments, hoping to learn. Others simply came to sit quietly and listen. Kwame watched as the cafe transformed from a forgotten corner to a small hub of inspiration and connection. Late one evening, Kwame noticed something unusual. A small group of international journalists had arrived. Cameras, microphones, lights, they wanted interviews, footage, anything they could get. Kwame felt nervous. He knew that revealing too much could disrupt the man's quiet life. But the old man simply smiled and returned to the piano. He played a single note, then another, weaving the melody in a way that held everyone's attention. The room went silent. Even the journalists stopped typing or adjusting their cameras. The music filled the space, touching hearts without a single word. After the performance, the man looked around at the crowd. He nodded at Kwame and said softly, "Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting them hear." Kwame realized that the real story wasn't just the viral video or the millions of views. It was the impact of kindness, patience, and artistry. It was how a single note could bring strangers together, make them pause, and feel something human. As he walked home that night, Kwame thought about how quickly life could change. A single choice, pressing the record button, had set in motion a series of events that connected the world to a quiet, elderly man who had spent decades in solitude. He smiled, knowing this was only the beginning. Kwame returned to the cafe the next morning, the air buzzing with anticipation. Word had spread, people whispered about the old man, some coming from across the city, others hoping to catch a glimpse through the dusty windows. The streets outside hummed with excitement. Even though the cafe was small, it felt alive in a way Kwame had never seen before. Inside, the elderly Korean man sat at the piano, his posture calm, eyes closed. He placed his fingers on the keys, and a single note rang out, soft but commanding. Everyone inside froze, captivated by the simple sound. Kwame's phone was ready, recording again, but this time he felt it wasn't just about going viral. Something deeper was happening. As the melody grew, the old man glanced at Kwame and whispered softly, "Do you see? This is why I play." Kwame nodded, understanding. This music was more than notes, it carried stories, memories, and unspoken emotions. The melody wrapped around everyone in the room like a warm embrace, quieting the murmurs of visitors and journalists alike. When they saw me, their faces froze. "What are you doing here?" the older woman snapped. "This house doesn't belong to you anymore." I smiled, calm, steady, unbothered. "Actually," I said softly, placing a folder on the table, "it does." Tun stepped forward, handing them the court order. "By law, everything your late son left, including this property, belongs to his wife, Mrs. Amara Adiwale." The old woman's hand trembled. "No, that's not possible. She was never meant." I interrupted her gently. "He meant every word when he wrote my name, Mama. He trusted me. He loved me. And even death couldn't erase that." She stood up, her voice shaking. "After all we did for you." I took a slow breath. "You threw me out when I was 8 months pregnant. You left me on the street to die. You didn't do anything for me, you destroyed me. But I rebuilt myself. And now, I'm taking back what's mine." Her daughter-in-law started to argue, but the police officer beside Tun stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "you've been served notice. You have 1 hour to vacate the property." The silence that followed was heavy. Then the older woman's cup fell from her hand, shattering on the floor. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this." I met her eyes and said quietly, "No. I already regretted loving a family that never saw me as one of them. But now, I just feel free. They began packing in silence while I stood by the window, holding my baby close. Outside, the garden was overgrown, wild, forgotten. Just like me once. Tund came up behind me. "It's over," he said softly. I turned to him and smiled faintly. "No, Tund. It's only beginning." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I looked around the mansion, the art, the gold, the furniture, all symbols of a love that ended too soon. "I'll turn this house into something my husband would be proud of. A place for women like me, who lost everything and still stood tall." He smiled, his eyes warm. "You really are a brave mother." I laughed quietly. "And you're a good man, Tund. I don't know what I would have done without you." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You would have survived. Because that's who you are." For a moment, we just looked at each other. There was no rush, no confusion, only peace. Then he said, half teasing, "So, does the new queen of this empire plan to offer her partner a job?" I smiled, finally feeling light again. "No job," I said softly. "But maybe, a home." He chuckled, shaking his head, and before I could say another word, he pulled me into a hug, strong, safe, and real. Outside, the sky turned golden. And for the first time since my husband's death, I didn't feel like a widow anymore. I felt like a woman reborn. Because I learned that revenge isn't about hate. It's about reclaiming your power with grace.